Cheryl Lynch here again, and today is the day. Today is the day everyone has been waiting for. This is what everybody asks me, how I assemble my books. So I'm going to share with you that today. So first, if you've been following along, I have 4 pages to my book and the cover. And I told you I don't trim them yet. And just to reaffirm this, I stitched them onto batting. Oops, the tulips hitchhiked. I stitched them onto batting, and it's because I don't put a backing on them because they're messy. Look at them, they're messy. I tie off my threads. Here's where I did some hand stitching. So that's why I only do them on batting. The backs will be covered. So right now I'm going to take them and I'm going to trim them all to 6.5 by 8.5 inches, because that's the size of the pages. It's also the same size as the blocks I did in my Wednesday wanderings. So you can make a trip into a book, you can make it into a quilt, and that all has similar qualities and similar methods of putting them together. So excuse me while I go trim my blocks. Okay, so now all the blocks are trimmed. These are trimmed to 6.5 by 8.5, and this is 6.5 inches wide. This is going to go out, protrude out of the top, so I haven't trimmed it yet, but the distance from the bottom to this top is also 8.5, so that it will accordion fold the right way. So the next step after trimming your blocks is to back them with the Peltex. Now, Peltex is a heavy, heavy-duty stabilizer. This is what it looks like. You can see it's very, very stiff. And it's called Peltex. This one is 72F. So Peltex comes not fusible at all, fusible on one side or fusible on both sides. I like to use the one that's fusible on both sides, and that will become clear. Now you can see that on this side, it's got a plastic backing, and that's a good thing. Leave that on. You want to leave that on. So I'm going to take a piece of the Peltex that I have cut. Now you may say to me, why can't I use Timtex? Well, you could use Timtex, except Timtex is not made anymore. So Peltex is a great option to use, and it's nice and stiff. So I'm going to take a piece that's bigger than my block. My pages put together will come to 32.5 inches. Now, you would make this as long as the number of pages you have. I think a whole piece is much better than taking more than one piece. And I'm going to lay out my blocks. And I want to leave a little bit on all the edges because I'm going to trim them up. So there's my cover. Here's my page number 1. And I put them in an order that I liked, and you should do the same with your blocks. I mean, you might want to do chronological, you might want to do what your favorite things are. You might even want to put them in order of something that looks pleasing to your eye with different colors. So here we go. Here's the 3rd page. So the cover, 3rd page, and then here is my last page. Now remember, I left that plastic on the back. So I'm going to leave it on the back. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave you for a minute. I'm going to press this with an iron so that it adheres to this side of the Peltex. And it doesn't have to be a really tight bond, just something like to tack it and keep it in place. Just be careful of anything that might be heat sensitive. For example, I'm not going to put the iron on top of the foam letters, and I'm not going to put the iron on top of the organza bicycles. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to press it, I'm going to remove the backing, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to have zigzagged the pages together. Okay? See you in a few minis. Okay, so I went to the sewing machine and I butted all the blocks together. Now, can you see? I just used a wide zigzag stitch and I came down through each one. And remember, I took the plastic backing off the back before I did it. And look, and now you can see also, you can see the zigzag on the back. So that will hold it all together. So that's a good thing where it is now. So the next step is to put on the backing. And I'm going to fuse the backing to the back of the Peltex. Now I want to show you this. Everything in Holland, when you go to restaurants or you buy things, comes back in blue and white. So these are napkins we came across a lot. These are bags from souvenirs. So while I was there, of course, I had to buy some blue and white fabric. So, and you asked me, why would you keep empty bags? For inspiration. So, of course, I found a fabric store and I bought a whole bunch of fabric that reminds me of Delft and reminds me of Holland. This one reminds me exactly of the napkins and of the souvenir bags. So this fabric I chose to use as the backing for my book because I think it is just perfect. It screams Holland. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take the backing, I'm going to lay the book, or the pages, so far it's not really a book, is it yet? Not yet. On top. And this time I'm going to adhere the backing to the back of my quilt, back of my book, by pressing. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to press this. So the backing now is fused to the Peltex. Remember, a two-sided Peltex. So the next step is to cover up the zigzags between the pages. And we want it to look nice. And we want it, in places it'll look like the binding, in places it'll look like the inside. So we have a couple of choices. We can use ribbon, and I want to show you the different ones I've used. So in the Holland book, I did use ribbon. In this cute little fun one, I used a velvet ribbon, which was fun, and then I embellished it with sequins and beads. In the birthday book, I used ribbon. And in the Key West Houses book, I used fabric that I covered with the dyed shells. So in the fabric one, I folded under the edges. So it's up to you whether you want to use ribbon or whether you want to use fabric. I kind of have a ribbon collection, so if I find ribbon that I like, I use it, that works. If I don't find anything I like, then I take fabric and I fold it under the edges. So this time, I have this cute blue and blue fabric with the green dots that I really like. So I'm going to use that to cover the seams. So what I'll do is I will take it and I will lay it over there and cut it. And I will do that for each of the sections. And then I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch on the right side and the left side of the ribbon on every single place. And that will anchor the pages and the Peltex to the backing, and that will also give me folding lines. So I'm going to go stitch. Okay, so I've top stitched the ribbon down on either side, so it nicely covered up the zigzag stitching, and I have trimmed the whole piece so that the top and the Peltex and the back are all the same. I just want to show you the back side. And I don't know if you can see the, here it's a different color. I had to change my bobbin thread. So you can see here the double row. And what's nice about that double row is that when it's time to fold the book, that gives you two edges to fold it on. So it's easier to see with this. You see how that's folded. So that double stitching gives you that nice edge. If it's just one, it gets a little too bulky. So the next step in doing the book, and the final step, is doing the binding. Now, you could try to use, the traditional sewn-on binding. I find it a little difficult to go around unusual shapes, and I usually have an unusual shape on my cover. And plus, I'm not sure you could really hand stitch it down with where it's fused to the Peltex. So what I do is I make a fusible binding. And I just want to show you a quick, easy way to make a fusible binding. Here's a cutting mat. So I take fabric, and I'm using this blue fabric, that blue Delft fabric, and I cut it a little wider than 1.5 inches. And then I put fusible on the back side, and then trim it to 1.5 inches. And that makes sure that my fusible gets to all the edges. Then I take a rotary cutter with a pinking blade. And these pinking blades are wonderful. The only negative with the pinking blade is they get dull very, very fast. So I really save them for special uses. So I take my edge, I take my fused binding, my fused piece of fabric rather, and then, so this is 1.5 inches, so each side should be 3/4. So I set that down, 3/4, that's a half, right? 3/4, and I take my pinking blade, and you really need to press hard, especially if you've used this blade before. And sometimes it comes apart and sometimes it doesn't. So if it doesn't come apart, I just go in there with my scissors, and it's really just hanging on by a thread is what the issue is. And you can just go in and clip it out. All right, so I'm going to take a piece of the binding. I'll take a piece of this, and you're going to have to use your imagination at this point. I'll take a piece of the binding, and I'm going to remove the paper. So I remove the paper, so now this is fusible. And I'm going to take it, and I'm going to wrap it around my book. Now, I'm going to take some parchment paper. Because what I'm going to do with my binding, now imagine this is a long piece, I'm going to lay it on top of the pages, and I'm going to press it. Now, if you didn't have the parchment paper here, this side of the fusible binding is going to stick to your ironing board. So this way, it just sticks to your parchment paper. You pull it up, and then fold it to the back. So it's stuck on the front, flip it, fold it to the back, iron it. So you do this all the way around, and when you're done doing that, this is what it's going to look like. And do a stitch. I just stitched all the way around in one continuous line, and it's stitched on the front, and it's stitched down my back. I make my folds in my book. I really crease it, and voila, an embellished folded fiber book. You got it. So I hope you enjoyed these lessons. Remember, if you want to learn more about it, don't forget my book. And otherwise, thanks for watching me. Oh, this is my book. Don't forget my book. And if you do want to see more of the fiber books, they're on my website. You can see the front, and you can see a close-up of the inside. My website is CherylLynchQuilts.com. And go to the portfolio section, fiber books. Hope you come visit.